Hey guys, my name is Ryan and welcome to Overwatch Central. So I want the intro for this to be incredibly quick as we have a very big video with lots of stuff that's worth going over. Tilt is a big thing in Overwatch. I think a lot of us suffer from being tilted. So today I decided to speak to Sam Greenblatt, who is Esports Psych, basically has an MS in clinical psychology and does a lot of stuff in esports around consulting, therapy, all that kind of jazz. And a lot of the advice that Samuel gives in this video about not tilting yourself and how to de-escalate and untilt others, I've taken into my own games, managed to use them and climbed quite a lot as well. But more importantly, my games have been a lot more fun and enjoyable. I do want to do a follow-up video to this, so if you do have any questions for Esports Psych, put them down in the comments below. I'll be sure to use them in a future video that we do together talking about tilt. But in any case, let's get started with today's video. So I guess we'll start off with introductions. Who are you? What is it that you do? And what is tilt? Like, how can you really sort of describe what tilt is and how people can get affected by it?
I could answer the first questions easier, but the second one's going to be a little longer. My name's Sam Greenblatt. I'm getting my doctorate in clinical psych. I'm just finishing up my, hopefully last year. I have my master's in clinical psychology, and I've been spending the last 9 years of my life studying psychology and the last few decades of my life playing video games. So this tilt issue is something that really interests me because as an avid gamer, it's something that I encounter a lot, and it's both a gaming problem and a psychological problem. And to answer what is tilt, I'd say that tilt is any state of mind in which your emotions are getting in the way of making the most effective decisions when you're playing video games.
Yeah, and I think that's the really interesting stigma, I suppose, that people need to break, is tilting isn't necessarily just telling people to shut the fuck up in voice chat or like picking Torb and jumping off the map. It's a lot more subtle, and I think that's the thing that catches a lot of people out as well.
Right, absolutely. I think that we really think of tilting sometimes when we're having a discussion around it, my teammate tilted, etc., that someone's picking attack Torb and they're building the turrets and spawn, or somebody's feeding over and over and not even attacking the enemy. But I think almost everybody tilts to some extent. Tilting isn't just those extreme situations, but it's also when we get tunnel vision because we feel like we're losing, so we go for that extra kill when we know we should have played it safe. Or let's say even we're a healer and we're going for this res that's a dangerous res because we feel like a desperate attempt to have the ball continue to roll during a losing battle. Anytime that we get over aggressive or over defensive, or we're really just emotionally affected by the game, I would say that that's tilting in some way as well.
For sure. I guess the sort of main areas that people want to go straight onto is, we'll first talk about how to avoid tilting altogether. Say if you're going into a game, you haven't played all day and you're like, I really don't want to tilt, I don't really want to get annoyed, it's been a bit of a problem. How do you go into that mindset trying not to tilt? What should you be trying to do?
Okay, so I think there's three main parts to reducing tilt. The first takes place completely outside of the game, and I'd label it as just vulnerabilities. So everyone has different vulnerabilities. There's no one answer I could give right now of this situation will automatically make you more vulnerable to tilt. But it's everyone's job to start to become aware and learn what kind of factors make you more susceptible to tilting. Is it playing later at night? Is it playing on an empty stomach? Is it if you had a rough day at work or at school? Are you more likely to tilt? So being aware of that in the first stage of anything happening, at least make you aware, okay, this is a situation in which I'm more likely to tilt. I need to be aware of what's going on. Maybe take it easy. Or if you tilt 100% of the time that you're feeling really vulnerable, avoiding the situation altogether. The second stage is kind of the trigger. And again, just like vulnerabilities, different people get triggered by different things. So some people, it takes a lot to get triggered. It takes the teammates starting to flame in the chat, calling everyone an asshole, or, doing attacks Torb or Sim or something that is clearly meant to throw a Widow who's never done Widow before. The real solution with this, you can't really change the triggers happening. Sometimes things are going to be triggering to making you feel tilted in game, but it's about being aware of, okay, this happens. So when this happens, I usually react in an emotional way. And by anticipating that you're going to react in that emotional way, it kind of takes the power out of the emotional side of your brain. It says, okay, so this is fueled by this situation. I expected this to happen. Now let's make some other choices. Then the third part is the more obvious part, which is kind of the tilt itself. And when you feel yourself getting tilted, the best thing to do is learn to become aware of when you're getting tilted. Sometimes we don't realize that we tilted until the game was over, or the match was lost, or the round, the team fight was lost. So becoming aware of what your patterns are when you tilt. Do you go over aggressive? Do you waste your ults? Do you kind of feed into the enemy? Or do you go into chat and start flaming people? Even in addition to these behaviors, what do you feel? And what kind of emotions or thoughts are going through your head? Are you feeling anger? Are you feeling, I can't believe this is happening again? Are you thinking, I can't believe this asshole? And when you notice those signs, when you've trained yourself over time to become more familiar with the signs that you're beginning to tilt, that's the time to kind of intervene and make the switch. But the solution to detilt is to take a few seconds to not act at all, to completely stop what you're doing. And maybe this is easier if you've just gotten killed, or it's between rounds, or you're waiting for the team to regroup. But to take a few seconds to completely stop what you're doing. Maybe even just take your hands off the mouse and keyboard or your controller and look away from the screen. Take a few deep breaths and just observe what's going on around you. This is what my body is feeling. This is what's going through your mind. These are my urges of things that I want to do. And once you've kind of collected that information and taken yourself out of the moment for a second, that could really help step from that emotionally charged decision-making state into a more rational one. And that's the moment where you could collect yourself and think, okay, what are my goals here? My goal is to win. What's the most effective way to win? All right, it's not by feeding, it's not by flaming my teammates. Let's think rationally and let's move forward. And by taking those seconds to notice what's going on, to step back and to come up with a rational solution for what's going on, that could really help increase your chances that you end up winning the game. There's two things that we could do in any situation where something is happening that we don't like. There's change, and that's the thing that people go to often most. And then there's acceptance. But acceptance could be really powerful too. If you can accept, let's say I just came out of a game where people are throwing, or I'm in a game and I try to help people to not throw and it ends up happening anyway. If you're not able to accept that this is going to happen from time to time, and unfortunately, of course it is, because we're in an environment where it's 12 human beings trying to work together or against each other, there's going to be conflict. And by accepting that this is an inevitability that's going to happen, you're going to get 3 Mercy mains on your team at some point, no matter how great the system that Blizzard designs is. By accepting it, you become more able to work with these negative situations.
I think when it comes to progressing in Overwatch, there could be a lot of elements that deter people from getting what they want out of it. Such as maybe they want to improve on a certain hero, but they're on a losing streak and stuff like that. How are you able to sort of see the bigger picture in those situations where you've had 2 really bad games and you're frustrated and you need to sort of remind yourself that I'm not playing to go up in rank and play to improve?
Right, so I think that depends on kind of clarifying your goals, because sometimes you can have 2 goals at the same time and they can conflict. So let's say your goal is to improve on a specific character. You're just not playing well on that character because your goal is to improve. Maybe you're already not good at that character. So you're likely to lose a game on a new character that you're trying out. Maybe this is even quick play and people judge themselves on their performance in quick play also. I think the thing is, it's helpful to clarify your goals before going into each game. Sometimes I've heard a lot of coaches talk about even clarifying your goals even smaller, not just about improving, but I'm going to improve my accuracy, and I'm going to look at my accuracy at the end of this, and if my accuracy is higher than 40%, then I'm going to be happy. But by setting small and obtainable goals, you're more likely to feel success and more likely to be inspired to progress. If your goal is to get to Grandmasters, you're going to be frustrated almost every game, because every game you're not going to get into Grandmasters. But if your goal is to improve my positioning, improve my game sense, improve my ult usage, you will see your progression from game to game. You'll be more reinforced to play the game, and you'll have a better experience while progressing as a gamer more effectively.
When it comes to working with people on your team that are tilting, and not even tilting, just not communicating, how can you de-escalate a lot of these situations?
Certainly in something like that, there comes the balance of acceptance and change. Any advice that I could give right now, it's only going to work a fraction of the time, because unfortunately or fortunately, we can't control other people to the extent that sometimes we would like. So I think one of the most important steps to de-tilting a teammate that people skip over is kind of validation. People that are tilting, they feel upset, they often feel kind of isolated in that I'm the only person that's good on my team, I'm the only person that cares, I'm the only person who's playing this competitively. By letting them know that you're frustrated too at the loss, that it makes sense that they're feeling what they're feeling. You don't have to agree with their actions. You don't have to agree that, it's the right move to jump off 3 times in a row because you're upset. But you could agree with what they're going through. Listen, man, we really got rolled that last round. That really sucked. By validating what they're going through rather than coming at them with an aggressive standpoint, which I see so much, one person tilts and the other person tilts against them, suddenly the whole team is tilted, you increase your chances of that person de-escalating. Kind of the psychologists or social workers that have worked with pro esports teams, it was revealed that one of the main issues was a lack of trust or a lack of communication or things that weren't communicated to each other. And I think this is just a very human issue. Regardless, we tend to have biases towards other people, that their actions are more based on things that are inherent in their personality. And we tend to have biases towards ourselves, that our actions are more based on just situations that have happened. So if I'm being an asshole, I'm more likely to think that it's because I went through something rough today. Whereas if you're being an asshole, I'm more likely to think that you're an asshole. When we see people and we see somebody not performing at their best, we don't know, okay, they went through something rough today, or maybe they're just having some ping issues or things like that, and they're inherently a good person. We just see them as this is their entire being. And because of that misrepresentation of the person, we can make all sorts of assumptions that are not helpful in winning the game.
Yeah. And I mean, we've mentioned before people jumping off of maps and stuff with throwing and tilting. What about those much more discreet versions of tilting? What kind of things should you be looking out for on your team? A really good example of that, I suppose, is when people are quite vocal in team chatting and they go very quiet. This is something that I do quite a lot as well, where it can be really difficult to get your team to communicate, especially in servers like EU and stuff like that. How can you get your team on the same wavelength before a match even starts as well? Because that seems to be the point where people start to tilt, is right at the start when people aren't introducing themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes people are in a bad mood and they're not going to enter chat, but one of the things that you could do to really increase not only the chances that you win and that your team is cohesive, but that you have a positive experience, is rather than focusing on the negative aspects of your teammates that you don't like, research shows consistently that positive reinforcement is more effective than negative reinforcement in trying to change behavior. So what I think is more effective than pointing out what people might be doing wrong is pointing out what people might be doing right. If one person regroups and the other person doesn't regroup and they go out alone, it might be more effective to praise the person on your team that regrouped rather than yell at the person who didn't regroup. You could certainly call them out on it in a nice way, but by praising the person who regrouped, people on the team are hearing, praise for somebody that regrouped. And of course, we're not children. We're not looking for each other as mommies and daddies to tell us that we're good boys and girls. But people like being complimented. It's an innate human reaction. And when you start to reinforce positive behaviors, that was a great alt, good job, good call, regrouping, like let's not feed. By calling out the behaviors that you would like to see more in the match and praising them, they are more likely to occur.
I think there's certainly that element of tilting that we've gone over that, which is much more angry and aggressive and stuff. But certainly like performance anxiety and all that jazz tends to be like another version of tilting. How do you approach pressing the competitive button and feeling quite scared and anxious about it? And I think because of that, you can often tilt quite quickly because of it as well, especially when things start to go wrong. How do you go about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the problem even goes beyond that sometimes. I made a Reddit post a while ago asking what people would be interested in for someone with getting his doctorate in psychology to talk about these issues. And although the most upvoted messages were about, or comments were about tilting, I got a lot of private messages from people who weren't comfortable, posting in a more public eye, saying that they're not even comfortable approaching competitive at all, and some people are even backing away from quick play because they're afraid of being criticized for their quality of gameplay. And it's tragic, especially because a lot of people turn to video games because they're not so comfortable socializing in real life, and it's a little more of a safer environment sometimes than interacting in real life. But what I would say is the key to overcoming discomfort in other people criticizing you or having that performance anxiety isn't through reassuring yourself, and it's not through avoiding situations where you become distressed, but it's through throwing yourself over and over in situations that you have the potential to become distressed, and letting yourself feel that distress. Letting yourself learn firsthand that it is survivable, that it's something that you can get through, and your mind and body go through a process eventually called habituation, where because you've been exposed to something so many times, it has a less of an impact on you. On the other hand, when we start to avoid situations, they become greater and more nebulous and more scary of a situation. So my ultimate suggestion with performance anxiety is to continue to meet the challenges head on.
I think when it comes to areas where players are looking at their rank, especially they've lost 100, 200 SR, there's that element of dissonance, I suppose, where they know that rank doesn't really matter, that they can make that back up. That's just the competitive way of playing. You sometimes win, you sometimes lose, you have win streaks, you have loss streaks. But often the emotion of losing that many can be quite uncomfortable and quite frustrating, and that can lead you to having a much more terrible time in competitive. How do you start to reason with yourself and start to listen to the voice in your head instead of almost the child inside that's really upset and down about losing so many games?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in those situations, you could especially be vulnerable to be in that emotional state where you feel like you deserve to be at a higher place, and you're even more likely to be upset and triggered. But the ironic fact of the matter is this creates a self-fulfilling prophecy, and by being so upset at having lost so much SR, you're likely going to be playing at a level of performance that's maybe even below the level of SR that you're at even after the drop, because you're so emotional. So the trick from there is really to start to reframe. I would not play for at least a few minutes and really sit and really think about what's going on, how your emotions are affecting your actions and decisions. Getting yourself to be able to play at the same level that you were playing at your highest performance means sometimes doing a reset, sometimes maybe jumping into quick play, working on the basics, and doing an emotional reset. Accepting that, listen, this is where I'm at right now. I don't like it. It's not where I want to be, but I could accept that this is the reality of the situation.
I guess finally to sort of finish on then, what are the closing and main arguments that you want to make in a video like this? Like what to untilt when you're tilting, how to avoid tilting altogether, and how to bring down and de-escalate situations with people on your team.
Okay, so I would say that this is not just something that can best be dealt with in the situation. Listening to this video and jumping in and trying to apply it, it could have some sort of efficacy. But just like any sort of drill, going into the training room or doing anabots and working on your mechanical abilities, learning to become aware of how emotions are affecting you and taking a step out of the situation in order to play the game with the clearest, most effective mindset is something that is most effectively learned when you're taking time specifically to practice that skill. A lot of times that skill could be labeled as mindfulness, and you could look up how to practice mindfulness. There's a lot of ways to do it, but generally it always boils down to focusing on something in the present moment. Maybe in this case, it's the game itself. Noticing when your mind wanders or when your body is producing feelings or emotions, and gently bringing your attention back to the game, back to the object of focus. By practicing that with intent and doing drills to notice when your mind has wandered and bring it back, that's really, I think, the most effective and sustainable way to avoid tilt.
And sort of finally to finish on then, where can people find more from you? Because you're starting up sort of your own thing when it comes to de-tilting and educating the Overwatch community about tilting and staying on top of your emotions. Where can people find more of that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll be doing some content with Blitz Esports, so you could certainly look out for that on their YouTube channel. I do consultation about video gameplay or otherwise. If you're going through any sort of issues, you could contact me at esportspsych@gmail.com and also esportspsych on Twitter. And if you're in the New York City area, I do skill building, I do meditation, I do life coaching, I do it all. So you could reach out to me and hopefully I could give you some help.
And that's it for this time. Thank you very much for watching. Do check out Samuel on Twitter. All of his details in the description below. And as I said at the start of the video, do let us know any questions that you would like me to ask Esports Psych for a follow-up video, I guess, in the comments below on how to untilt others, how to not be tilted yourself, and all of those kind of topics. But thanks for watching, take care, and we'll see you next time.